Good evening, everyone, and welcome for session 4 of the AIM Prime program. Today's session is a workshop on the scale-up journey, and we have today to take this workshop for us here, Dr. Shailendra Vyakarnam. Let me briefly introduce Dr. Vyakarnam. Dr. Vyakarnam is presently visiting professor at Cranfield University and also associate of the senior combination room at King's College, Cambridge. He has had a career as educator when he pioneered education for entrepreneurship as founding director of the Center for Entrepreneurial Learning at Cambridge. He has published a dozen books, supervised doctoral students, published in academic journals, advised policymakers, and held various board positions. Dr. Vyakarnam has mentored hundreds of deep tech entrepreneurs and co-founded several businesses over his career. More recently, Dr. Vyakarnam has invested as business angel in 7 firms, 3 of which are led by women entrepreneurs. So with this brief introduction about Dr. Shailendra Vyakarnam, welcoming you to the session and handing it over to you.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here. It would be so nice if you could, if it allows you to put your cameras on, to have your cameras on, at least for the first few minutes. As talking to myself is enjoyable, but talking to a black screen is less enjoyable. So that's much nicer. Thank you very much. And then I can see who's who and where people are. And Premnath, good to see you. Thank you for joining. And who else do I recognize? Of course, Anmol I recognize. So what a wonderful challenge for you all in this really extremely difficult time in our lives with all the health challenges, and no doubt some of you are facing family challenges as well, that you should find the time and the energy to think about how you might create a deep tech venture, or some of you are already doing so. So first and foremost, my salams to all of you. My congratulations for you even thinking along these lines, because it is really, even in the best of times, starting a deep tech business is definitely a non-trivial activity. To do it in the current climate, you know, all hats off to all of you. And also hats off to NCL Venture Center and all the teams coming together to stimulate something, because my God, we need deep tech solutions right now to help our society to climb out of all kinds of challenges that we face, not only health, but also climate, food waste. The list is so big, right? Even the UN SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, had to compress it to 17 mega items. But if you go down to that, there's so much more that we can all be doing. So I'm absolutely delighted to be part of your journey, a tiny part of your journey, but a part of your journey. Those few words, let me just begin the process before we run out of time, because I am enjoying myself with my talk. So workshop on the scale-up journey, that's what we're tasked to do. We have about 2 hours, I think, to get through this material. And the main learning objectives in the briefing discussions that we've had are one, that you appreciate the characteristics of the innovation journey. So this is not an anecdotal piece only. This is a piece that's coming from the perspective of having researched this field for nearly 30 years and having worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, having thought about it, read about it, written about it, and so on. So that's the source of, if you like, understanding the characteristics of the innovation journey, and how some of that hopefully will help you to be better prepared to avoid the surprises and the risks that might be waiting and lurking for you. My hometown is Bangalore, and in the old days, really old days, it used to be a smooth journey from one part of Bangalore to another. Nowadays, that journey is overtaken by speed bumps and potholes, right? And you have to be ready for those, otherwise your car is completely wrecked. That simple metaphor, I would say, is the same thing. You will have potholes, speed bumps, and very exciting takeoffs. You just need to know when those things are going to happen to you. Also, that entrepreneurship needs to be thought through as more of a holistic approach to management challenges. Oftentimes we get stuck with thinking only about money. We need to raise money. We need to raise money. We think by raising money, we solve all problems. Or others of you in the group will be thinking, oh, I just need my IP from the university or my research center. I've got a patent, all problems will be solved. And then, of course, there's folks like me that tell you, I just find a customer or two, then all your problems will be solved. Then some psychologists will come and tell you, hey, just build a team, Baba, that'll be it. When you fix a good team, everything will be solved. Well, yes and no. All of these things are important, but actually, as entrepreneurs, you need to think of yourself either as a Superman or a Wonder Woman, where you're coming together in teams to resolve all these issues. And then for those of you that are on this program as policymakers and managers of ecosystems, where is the most appropriate and relevant intervention for you? Right? So I just had a meeting this morning with an accelerator program. Actually, the meeting was at the railway station in Cambridge. And I learned that it's such a deeply programmatic approach that nobody's getting time actually to build their business whilst they're on it, right? So this is a health warning, not only for the accelerator in the Cambridge one that I was talking about, but also for Premnath and all of us and me and everyone, that we have to be a bit more open and less programmatic. So what do we need to actually provide at the right time? Because one thing I have learned with entrepreneurs is the idea of just-in-time learning. Those of you that are starting will shut out almost everything except the stuff you need at that given moment. And yet when we're running programs and interventions of various kinds, we will have, in January it's this, in March it's that, in June it's this, in September it's so and so. And actually your businesses might be running at different speeds. So how do we get to prioritize and understand that? So let's have a think about all of this by understanding the characteristics of the innovation journey, and as a result of which, hopefully, you'll all have some of this to take away. So the journey itself is split into two parts for me, right? Stage one, if you like, the rocket stage, booster, etc., is understanding that before you start the journey, you have to prepare. Another silly side example, my wife and I are thinking actually of going on a short break to the Lake District in the UK. So now we have to think about where to stay, what the route is going to be, what shoes, boots, this, that, the other way to take. So that's stage one, just the preparation stage. Then we'll actually hopefully get on our holiday and we won't be locked down. We'll walk around the mountain hills a little bit near the lakes, can recharge our batteries. So that's the second stage. So in that context, I believe there's a translational journey. You need to figure out what it takes to take the idea out of the laboratory into the big wide world. How do you persuade people that you're onto something, right? How do you prepare your case? And then knowing what's coming up next and your own readiness for it, personal readiness for it. That's the translational bit. So I was mentoring some people over breakfast this morning. It became very evident to me that one very highly skilled data scientist and one very highly skilled school teacher had come together. They have an absolutely breakthrough product idea. What they don't have is a commercial person who knows how to organize deals with the education sector, with the big exam boards, the big schools, right? So they don't know how to price themselves. How's that going to happen? Then I have a waste remediation business I was talking with as well. There again, brilliant marine biologist, systems engineer, finance, this, that, all that sort of stuff, but nobody who knows how to roll their sleeves and go and talk to the waste industry on their topics, on their issues. So your design thinking folks will have a really deep appreciation of how that's done. You need to draw on that. So then assuming you've got yourself ready, you've figured out actually what your business is going to be, then you have a scale-up journey. And I'll introduce you to something called the triple chasm model, which hopefully will give you yet more milestones and performance indicators, etc., that you can use to know that you're on the correct route, your own satellite navigation, if you will. So tools and guidelines. Meanwhile, as a platform of activity that you'll get from the Venture Center, you've got a phenomenal network of people that the Venture Center knows, and through AIM Prime and through all the other connections that you get made. Actually, already in the warming up to this, we met so many fantastically talented mentors and others. And you'll get lots of tools, not only from me, but from others, some of which you can begin to apply and have your own discretion of which ones are the appropriate ones. In the additional resources, there are readings, videos, all sorts of things, the so-called playbook, fantastically deep amount of resource that you've got. So all of this to help you out. Okay, so let's get started then. The translational journey, what does that look like? What I'm showing you on the screen right now is pretty much a simulation of all the things that you need to do. Whether you do it in 6 months or you take 5 or 6 years to do this, this overall is kind of the journey you will end up taking to validate your business. So first and foremost, it starts off with, so what is it you've got, right? What is it actually that you have got? I'll talk about this in a moment. What are its technical attributes and what are the advantages? So this is where the IP discussions come in, the scientists get involved, various engineering people get involved, and everybody says, okay, so what's going on here? Then your marketing guys come in and below that line and say, well, how is it different from anything else? How does it compare with rival technologies? Is it faster, smaller, cheaper, different? Is it 10 times better, 2 times better? So some of you will be aware of the Solexa story and the Illumina story, which is the gene sequencing machine that was created by Kleineman and Shankar Balasubramaniam in Cambridge under the chemistry department. Their gene sequencing was something like 10,000 times more powerful than anything else on the market at that time, right? And it's that level of technology jump which they brought in, which all of us are now using to track the virus, the coronavirus, and everything else that's going on around us. The whole human genome program took off when affordable gene sequencing came to life. So that's the kind of thing to say, well, so what? How does that go? So that's your first filter, basically. What have I got? How am I explaining it? Why is it better than anybody else? Never mind what your customers are looking for, your lawyers are looking for, anything else. First and foremost, figure out what you've got. When you understand that fundamentals of what you've got, you can then look in the marketplace and say, where is the product market fit going to come from? Right? Where is the best fit? So I'm using the word applications over here. Applications basically, where can I apply to this market or to that market? So just think of that as a marketing term. And then where's the best bang for buck? Where is it most likely to have the biggest difference for the customers, for the people that are using it? And actually, the third stage would be, okay, so those 4 or 5 markets that we've approached have the most urgent need, most urgent requirement. Where will I make the most money? And that's where I will aim at. And that's the storyboard I give to my investors. But they know that I've done both the first ring and the second ring in this diagram to then justify why the third ring is my choice.
Shai,
yeah,
can I interrupt? I think, have you put on your slides because we can't see things?
Oh, okay. I thought I was sharing the screen.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Thank you. I thought I was sharing the screen, but clearly I haven't. Is that visible now?
Yes, you can go to full screen, please. Yeah. Okay. Did we miss any slides before this?
Not if everyone is sleeping, no. But it's okay. No, I can also see you all on the side of the screen now. Okay, good. So thank you, Prem. Thank you very much, Prem. At least one person was looking at it. So just to summarize in 2 lines, then the first ring here is saying, can you define your technology in terms of why it's better than anybody else's? Then can you matchmake with the I don't know, 7 or 8 different marketplaces where it might apply, so-called applications, right? The potential applications and segmentation. It's a brainstorming activity. And thirdly, then comes the okay, we've done that, we've filtered this, we know which customers have the greatest pain points, but also where are we going to make the most money and best return on investment for our investors? That's the one we want to focus on. So you'll always be having this creative tension. So I sent out a reading, which hopefully is in your resource pile. It's called The Markets Approach. And just to give you 2 lines of summary for this, why markets approach? It's how you're going to validate your project. What's the homework you need to do in that first part of your translational journey? It says, okay, what are my markets? So you've got the big one, the so-called total available market, total sustainable market, accessible, obtainable, all these sort of big pictures. So typically what I see in pitch text for that is, it's a $40 billion market, blah, blah, blah. It's in this geography, that. Brilliant. That's the horizontal bar in the T shape, capital T, right? Then you have to have the vertical part of the letter T, which says, okay, but who are the customers and why will they buy from me? Because it's all very well telling me it's a $40 billion market opportunity, but unless you can identify the first 10 customers you go talk to, it never becomes a reality. So when you read the document, you will see that I've addressed those two aspects. By approach, I just mean, okay, now we know what the market's going to look like. What's the best approach that we have? By which read business models? Okay, should we license? Should we sell know-how? Should we build and sell, make and sell, buy and sell? Should we get royalties? How does it all package up? Third part, so is risks and returns. You know, how much money we need to put down? What's the risk likely to be? What's the return likely to be? So that's pretty self-defining. But this is an iterative process. As you go round and round, keep asking this question over and over again. As you get more information from the marketplace, as you talk to more people, you get deeper and deeper into these questions. Your fourth module there is knowledge, by which to read IP. I take a much bigger perspective to this. I think not only our intellectual property in terms of patents and copyrights and trademarks, but also who's in the team, who knows what in the team, right? And how do you sustain that? Team itself, a really massive issue. Who's doing what? What's the breadth and depth of experience? How do they get on with each other? All of that sort of stuff. The soft and the hard components, job roles, etc., go into that teams. Also, I would say that board governance would go into that. How we reward teams goes into that. The equity splits, the salaries, the options agreements, the motivations, etc., go into that whole area of thinking. What do we need by way of resource to take up the opportunities in the marketplace? The last construct here is sustainability, and by which it could have two meanings. One is, will this business last more than 5 minutes, right? Is it sustainable? The second thing is, what impact are we having on the planet and on society with the work that we're doing? Now, interestingly, I think that is becoming a bigger and bigger part of our day-to-day agenda, and I'm really pleased to see that. It's only still, I think, the undergraduates who somehow come up with apps that have no meaning, or business students that come up with this sort of stuff. And you think, gosh, it's so much bright, smart people. Why are they coming up with this kind of idea? So that's kind of the market's approach. Please do read. It's a Word document somewhere in the resource pack in the library. I think it's been uploaded. So this is part one of your journey. Oops. Let me just take the first part of that circle then. It says, so what is it you've actually got? Let me give you two examples here. Okay, the first one, which you see, simple pressure cooker. When I first heard about it, it was defined to me as a hydrothermal liquefaction using concentrated solar power, and that was it. So what is it used for? Okay, concentrated solar power. Yeah, I get that. So there must be some reflector somewhere that's concentrating the solar power. So all solar cookers. What is hydrothermal liquefaction? Well, under pressure, when the presence of water, but no presence of anything else, you heat it up to a certain temperature and everything inside of it gets cooked. The pilot project was done by a British scientist, marine biologist actually, working jointly with friends at Kota University in Rajasthan. And he came back with wonderful pictures of a long tube in the focal point of the concentrated solar collectors, and he had basically cooked bagasse and this and that, and even bits of shreds of plastic into a bio waste. So it took a few conversations. I'll be honest with you, it took more than a few conversations to say, are you basically pressure cooking waste into a feedstock? And the answer is yes. Now, why is it important to just frame it as simply as that? Is because when you say you're pressure cooking something in waste into a feedstock or waste into money, investors understand it. You don't have to be a chemical engineer to understand HDL technology with CSP, blah, blah, blah. Right? How can we communicate what we have in a way that people understand it and also get inspired by the simplicity of the language behind it? This is really very, very important. So now, actually, there are two companies have come out of that. One is called 350 Solar. That's a UK company. I'm mentoring and I have some shares in it even. Now that I've retired from academic life, I can do these sort of things. And I just had a meeting with them this morning, and they're now talking about a continuous flow HDL system, blah, blah, blah. It's moving on. But basically, when the pitching to people, it's a pressure cooker system. The second one's interesting. That's out of Bangalore, where I had a negative pressure device for the removal of bacterial load in hospitals, particularly during visits by doctors and families, and thereby reduce the risk of C. difficile and other infections that are rampant in hospitals. I think even by the time I've told you this, you've probably switched off, right? So fundamentally, we had a long chat over a coffee break. And what I realized is the reverse pressure device, which is the size of a shoebox, with a nanomaterial particle-based filtration system, etc., it's fundamentally a vacuum cleaner. Vacuuming the bacteria out of the air. So what was unique about it is that it had a vacuum cleaner type device next to the patient's bed, so you could just literally suck the dust and the bacteria and so on into a highly filtered vacuum cleaner and thereby reduce the bacterial load in a hospital. That's all. Why call it a reverse pressure device, blah, blah, blah? Why not just say we have a variant of a vacuum cleaner that can suck the bacteria out of the air? Keeps it simple. I'm not quite sure what has happened to that project. It was one of these type of startup events. And the person that was putting it forward is married into a very, very wealthy family. And it was incredibly smart and bright. So whether the entrepreneurial venture actually was relevant in the end, or whether that individual pursued a more scientific pathway or other career, I'm not sure about. But the simplicity of the ideas is what I want to get over here. And I will be challenging you very shortly with trying to define what it is you've got in a breakout group in a few minutes' time. Now, going from simplicity back to more detailed, complicated assessment here. So what have we got? We've got the way to define your technology, to define your product. Let's take these sort of 9 layers here, right? And let's take the first 8. So you may have a base technology which can be applied to many different applications. Right? So like IoT sensors, for example, they can go into so many different things nowadays. But your basic sensor, what is it made of? How do you deal with it, etc., comes out as a base tech. Now, when you apply it, you might need to connect it to some device, maybe a radio transmitter of some kind, right? You then have maybe thousands of these across a farm. And then now you need a platform, you need a bit of software so that all of these IoT sensors can talk to something and provide their data. You might have an application for weather, or you might have an application for soil moisture content, or you may have some other application going on, and tools with which to do visualization of that data, to analyze it, to do it real time or otherwise, batch wise, however it is. It might then either go into mobile phones, or it might go back to computers. So you've got all these layers going on. All of that is then generating data, which each individual, I'm giving an example of farm now. So the farmer might use the data to make decisions about fertilizing or running water, or when to put seeds in, or when to harvest. All that could be going on. But there's also metadata from all these farms that are coming through, which could then be sold to big agri-tech companies that are providing seeds or fertilizers or whatever it is, pesticides, etc., saying this is the trend line that's taking place. So all of that then could get packaged into a product. You might call it Wizzo version 1, right? Do your analysis with this. The customer doesn't care of all the layers that are sitting behind the so-called product, right? They just have this thing on the phone. They can see whether they should put more water, more fertilizer, less fertilizer, red, green, yellow, and then you might provide know-how services on top of that. So if somebody gets a red flag on their phone that says, don't do this, don't do that, that red flag might also kick up some data at some center somewhere somebody phones the farmer and says, hey, by the way, what's going on, right? And the customer sees that. So just giving you like an agri-tech example, this applies in so many different ways. In medtech as well, you have a base technology. Currently, I'm dealing with some photonic chip idea that might do aging macular diagnostics using OCT. They want to make an affordable version. Their base tech is a silicon, is a photonic chip, but they have to put all these layers on top. And it's a non-trivial, I don't know, maybe $10, $15 million project possibly, depending on who's giving the advice at this point, to be honest with you. So that's the kind of layer. Go back far enough to Edison with his filament as the base technology, then he needed a light bulb, a vacuum thing. He needs AC, DC current, whatever. You need switches, you need copper wire, you need bayonet fittings, you need all that sort of stuff coming through. And the power sector needs data to figure out how much electricity to generate as more and more lights come on. I think that's a debate we're all having globally right now on the adoption of electric vehicles, right? So the debate in the UK is if everybody switched to electric vehicles, the UK does not have enough power generating resources to provide electricity for all the batteries that need charging up. So that's already quite interesting. So these are the kind of the layers of discussion that can take place. So now I would like you to go off in groups for about 15 minutes. Let me just set the task for a start and then ask for some help from Anmol. So breakout session of 15 minutes. And in your breakout, Anmol, do they have the PDF of the slide deck? Or is that going later?
That will go later. They currently
that can go later.
Yeah.
So please, if those of you that have savvy enough, please take a picture of the screenshot with your phones or whatever. And in your breakout group, try to explain what problem are you trying to solve, not what is your technology. It can be high level, doesn't matter. Like this morning's call for me this morning was about exam revision, was a high level problem that teachers can't give feedback to students quickly enough, and students need constant iteration, tutoring, and there are not enough teachers out there. So that's a big high level problem. The other one is like, millions of tons of plastic waste. How are we going to solve that problem? But whose problem is it? Are we solving the parents' problem, or the school's problem, or are we solving the children's problem? In the first example, or are we solving the problem for waste generators, or are we solving the problem for companies overall who might be hit with a CO2 tax after 2030, right? Or some waste tax of some kind might come in across European Union, and is that the problem we're solving? So please think about this two questions, and we will be coming back to whose problem are you solving, not just with me, but I suspect over and over again, you will be coming to this in different words. Okay, so let me stop sharing that screen. And so now, Anmol, who is doing the magic now of splitting everybody up into groups? Would you like to just explain the process to them?
Yeah, so what we have done is we have created 4 breakout sessions. That's a mix of startups as well as incubators in them. We also have ensured that there is at least one mentor in each group to facilitate the discussion. And so I'll open the rooms and you'll be put in there. You can pick up one problem, or you can share. Startups can share different problems, right, Dr. Shah? And then you can discuss.
No. I would just like them to answer those 2 questions, please, Anmol. What problem are you trying to solve, and whose problem are you trying to solve? Basically, interrelated question. Just those 2, and it's much harder than it looks.
All right. So I'm opening up the rooms. You'll be automatically directed there.
Thank you. Hi, Anmol.
Yeah.
Hi, Anmol. Can we give them like 2 minutes and then close the rooms?
Yeah, I'll just put in a warning of 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Super. Such good ideas sitting around, Anmol,
Absolutely.
in the group. How have the other workshops gone leading up to this one, first 3?
They're also good. Yeah. Received
Good
good feedback.
participation?
Yeah. We are around 60 participants.
Yeah, excellent numbers. I'm sorry, I saw that I spotted the faculty template too late.
No worries. No worries.
And there's a pressure washing device which is being used outside our house. And he's on one side of the house at the moment. As he comes around to this side, the noise becomes too much. I might have to take a 2-minute break and go to another side of the house to continue.
Sure.
You can probably hear it.
Currently, no. It's pretty. Your ear is good. Yeah.
When does this program finish, this particular series of classes?
So the classroom sessions go until 4th September.
Oh,
And then there is 6 months of one-to-one mentoring post that.
yeah. So I wanted to introduce you to this team from Silaton, but I was thinking of waiting till the end of this program, but I think that might be too long, right?
Yeah. Also, Rakesh, just to so we are live also on YouTube as well. So just to
Yes.
make you aware of that.
Of course.
Should I invite everyone back?
Thank you. Okay. So, Premnath, you were in one of the groups, I think.
Yes. So I don't remember which breakout room it was, Anmol, but we have at least 3 or 4 problems and answers to these questions.
Would you like to summarize, or would you like to?
No, I think one of the startups can do it.
Let's take one from each group, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So Bala, do you want to do it? You can start with yours. Anmol, do you need to unmute? Anmol?
Yeah, it's done now. Premnand, you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Good.
Yeah, so the problem is slow, subjective, and granular assessment of Ayurveda parameters. That's the problem. And who is interested in getting this problem solved? There are multiple customers, Ayurveda doctors, patients, could also be pharma companies.
Okay, it sounds a little, Bala, forgive me, but it sounds a little bit like everybody, right? So if you were to pick one, whose problem, really, the one person with the real pain point?
I think he had picked doctors, right? Bala?
Yeah,
And why would that
yeah.
be the case? Why did you pick doctors?
So, so currently, right, they have to spend close to half an hour to do a full assessment of the patients. If they do it faster, they can see more patients. And if we have a quantitative assessment, they can make better judgments.
Okay, okay, okay. Excellent. I get that. Okay. I'm not going to grill you anymore because we have only got 2 hours for this session. So the other people I can see on the screen are Manjusha. I think you were in my group. Would you like to just
Yes.
explain what the problem is and whose problem you're solving?
Yes, so actually I joined a little late, so I can talk about my problem that I told you. Well, so as I told that I'm working on battery technologies. I'm scientist, and so I'm having some solutions which can be import substituents, and as well as they can be having more energy density than current technologies. So as I said that government is pushing a lot about electric vehicles, and they are trying to establish end-to-end manufacturing of batteries in India, but we are still dependent on countries like China for the raw materials that are required to manufacture the batteries. So that problem I'm trying to address. I'm trying to what you can say, propose a new chemistry which would be based on alternate materials which are available within our country.
But Manjusha, you can give it a shot in terms of these questions here. So take one thing that you want to do, one customer segment, and you can describe what problems are you solving and for whose problem are you solving.
Okay, as Dr. Premnath knows, I'm working on two chemistries. So I'll take an example about a chemistry which can solve an issue of stationary energy storage. So yeah, so we are having mobile towers that are being run on either lead acid batteries or digistats, diesel-based digistats. So we can replace them. Even at some places they are replaced with lithium-ion batteries. So we can replace lithium-ion batteries with this new chemistry. Can I talk about that also, Dr. Premnath? What chemistry I'm talking?
Yeah, no, I think that the question was only problem you're solving and whose problem, right? So telecom towers,
Yeah.
right? If you're saying telecom tower companies are the people whose problem you're solving, you're giving them an alternative to DG sets and lead acid batteries, okay, which have these benefits, and that's what you're trying to solve, right? Sorry, so Shai, sorry for intervening, but
No, it's perfect. It's perfect because you're there on the ground, Prem. So I'm very happy. Totally. This is exactly, I mean, so that's the level of precision. If you can get to that, then you can say, okay, how much will they pay? What will they pay? How will they pay? How many of these are we going to need? All of those sort of questions become, something that you can do. So telecom towers in India, there must be tens of thousands of them. And there must be thousands of these generator sets. And imagine getting rid of all of those with the batteries, which are, if you like, made in India, right? That would be a massive contribution. And the telecom tower companies will therefore save money on diesel and this, that, and the other, and society benefits, etc. So they will hopefully be willing to pay a one-time cost for the batteries as opposed to continuous maintenance of things that are spinning and rotating and so forth. So that's the level of granularity that you need in order to be able to answer this question that applies to everybody. So we've got two groups so far. Did I spot Satya in one of the groups, or who was the other person, the other two groups that
So we had Harish who may want to share his problem.
Okay, super. Thank you, Mukta.
Sure. Hi, Shai. So the problem that we are trying to solve is we are trying to build a more efficient 5G base station. And whose problem are we trying to solve? We're trying to solve the problem of 5G radio head manufacturers. Just to be very clear, these are not the mobile service providers of the day. These are the people who make the radio head that sits in a mobile tower. So we're trying to solve their problem.
Harish, did you not start off by telling me what you do rather than what problem you
Oh, yeah, right, sure. So we work on gallium nitride, which is an enabling semiconductor technology, and it helps you make more efficient power amplifiers.
Okay.
So, which are currently enabling 5G for the
Okay.
most part.
So what's the problem that you're trying to solve?
And the problem that we're trying to solve is you cannot make a 5G base station without some of these semiconductor components that we are in the business of making. And we have our own patented technology for making it. Right.
Okay, so what's the problem, Harish?
So the problem is you need to make a 5G.
Yeah, go on.
The problem is that you need to make an efficient 5G base station.
Are they not already efficient?
So the fact
market. Why do they need your?
There are 5G base stations. Right, they're not efficient in that sense, and they're also not to scale.
By what percentage or by what number are they not efficient?
So typically we have efficiency boosts if you use our technology of more than 5%, and 5% at a network level is pretty high. So we're talking about energy efficiency. So that also reduces the amount of cooling, etc., that you need to supply to your 5G base station. Almost 50% of the power that you put into a base station is just used to cool it.
Okay.
So 5% is a pretty significant number in terms of efficiency.
And what does that mean? What does that mean to the customer that is acquiring your tech?
So our customers, our customers are the 5G radio head makers, and what it means for them is that they have reduced cooling costs, which means that they can more competitively price their solutions to people who deploy these networks.
There you go. We're getting closer to it. And by how much will they reduce their cooling cost?
I have no idea. I would say that it's conservatively about 25%.
Okay.
But those are, again, numbers that we have not tested on the field. So these are estimates.
Yeah. So again, for everyone listening in, see the level of detail we need. We need to say that what is the problem you're solving, not what is the technology you're selling, right? The problem you're solving is that the 5G devices are overheating. They absorb a huge amount of energy just to keep them cool. We've got a technology to cool down those masts, and that will therefore improve the efficiency by X%. And reduce the cost concomitantly, reduce the cost. Therefore, blah, blah, blah.
Got it.
I have a question here. Can we ask?
Sure.
Yeah. So basically the same thing can be looked at multiple levels, right? At one level, you could say that, for example, in this same example, we could say that the current the internet connectivity is not fast, or is not available broadly to the population, and that's the problem that I'm solving, making internet available, a faster internet available for the population, and the users are the two whose problem I'm solving. I can take at that level, or I can go, as Harish explained, I can go down into the granular level and say I'm developing a particular material, and that has these characteristics which could help in making these semiconductor components. When do you stop? Where do you keep this thing?
How far down do you go? Yes,
yeah, how far down?
I agree with you that internet connectivity for the country overall is the big goal, right? That's the big vision. That's at the level of the vision. Therefore, what do we need to do? We need more towers across, and in order to get more towers across, we use more energy. Therefore, we have this component of the technology which will enable that to work. So depending on, and then I think you need to work kind of in entrepreneurship. I've seen is that you need to be able to tell both stories. And so you're absolutely spot on that. Starting with a story like that, your first slide, if you will, I'm not just, you don't have to do it in the slide, but to say this is the big issue that we're trying to deal with as a country, as a nation, as a society, whatever. But it can't be done without certain key component technologies. We have one of those.
Okay. The only risk is that they might be too vague, right? See, in their case, they are doing certain components. So I would have actually insisted on knowing from him, what is the eventual product it will go into, because you're not going to build the entire substation, right? Entire station that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are
that's
only
the
Is the
reason.
question, Premnath, as incubator managers or people who are involved in these discussions, to what level we should go? Like you are saying, in the end, if the goal is to identify what is the price that we get, etc., then I need to go, like you are saying, go to the bottom most and say that, look, if you have this material, which device that it goes to, and which are going to sell, which product are you going to sell?
no.
Right?
Let us look at. Sorry, just to whose problem are you solving, right? So let's take. Sorry, the product you mentioned was a station, right? Or station head.
Right. It's a radio head. Yeah. For a
Radio head.
station.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the radio head. Who is? Give me an example of a company that makes it.
Ericsson.
Okay. So now Ericsson is going to take a call if they need to replace a component with what you're proposing. Am I right? So for them, you're
Yes.
going to gauge the value of whether it is going to make a difference or not,
Right.
isn't it? So they are facing a problem today because they are already selling these products. These are already in the market, right? Hmm? So it's
Yeah.
their problem that you have to zero in terms of. It might be that they are it's overheating, it's consuming too much energy. Maybe when you compare it to the Huawei product, you might find that they are doing better than Ericsson, and Ericsson needs to compete with Huawei, right? So it will get sharper and sharper, actually. And when you're, I think you should be probably going in that direction. I can understand what Shai was trying to say, which is that the larger problem is sometimes important as well. But in this case, unless you zero in, you will not be able to illustrate the clear value proposition at the end of the day. Okay. It
So
might,
that
yeah,
is the in the markets approach in the
yeah,
section called M. You
yeah,
have both the kind of the big market, you have your 40 billion, blah, 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 right? That's the big market thing. But then the vertical part is exactly as you said, you have to drill into the level.
yeah,
So if you like to paraphrase, just follow the money, because there is, there's a description. So in response to Tulsi's question, the point is
Right.
here, the big why is addressed by we need to solve the internet problem. But the focal point of the business venture itself is getting down to the level of what is the actual problem, for whom are you trying to solve it? Because without that, you can't send out invoices, basically. I mean, just to get very crude about this, because what would be the reason for them even to have a meeting with you if they don't understand what it is you're trying to do for them? So that's a level of detail that I think that we're needing to get to.
We had an interesting one from Shama also. Shama?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, please. Shai, just alerting you that we have finished 1 hour. Okay.
Yeah. I think if you don't mind, I would like to move on to the next. I think the basic point has been made here. The big why question might be addressed by, we want to solve humanity's problems or something, but the real, where the tire hits the road, if you like, is the very precise question of the problem that you're trying to solve and for whom, which then gives a reason for the conversation. So, am I sharing a screen, by the way?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. So I think if it's okay with you, I will move us on to the next part. So when we begin, so the question that I posed to you about what problem and whose problem is kind of towards the tail end of the attributes and advantages. Okay, starting to get into this area of applications. Now, one of the interesting things, we did focus right down with the Ericsson example of one typical application, but it may be that if you have a base technology, that can be applied to many, many different market segments, you need a thorough brainstorm to figure out, as I say, where are all the different places that you can take it. So I love that one example that came out of a company called ARM, and I'll give you an example of that actually in the next slide. Let's move it on. So if you want to be more than a project, you need to think about your marketplace, maybe like a dartboard, right? And you think, okay, my core technology that I'm trying to offer is that little red dot, the 50 score. And all the different segments and the different markets that I could go into, different applications to which I can apply my technology. So in the case of ARM, their first microprocessor which they came out with was perfect for mobile phones. And for those of you that have sufficient gray hair, you remember the early days of the mobile phone used to be the size of a brick. But as a result of the ARM chip, microchip, it was possible to reduce the size of that down to the size of, I don't know, a small packet of cigarettes, I suppose, the famous Nokia 3210 that came out. Now, what I saw on the marketing plan that was on the wall of one of the ARM executives when I visited them, also happened to be in Cambridge, was they showed that mobile phones was their first market segment. Right? I just imagined that. And then they said the second would be all the white goods into which they could put their chips in. So this would be washing machines, dishwashers, vacuum cleaners, blah, 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 all those household equipment. And so they went around the third one. By the time the third chip came around, Bluetooth had come out, also a Cambridge company called Cambridge Silicon Radio. They took the same approach. The first early versions of the Bluetooth chip was the ear set, the headsets for mobile phone conversations to be hands-free. And now you see ubiquitously Bluetooth is everywhere, right? All the segments that you can imagine. So same with the ARM chip has gone wider and wider. And now, since they were taken over by SoftBank, they're going into IoT and they're expanding. So what you could say is that, look, when you're talking to your investors, you can say, look, our market space looks like this dartboard, right? We're clear, we're a base technology or we're an application technology, call it what you will, depending on how clearly you're able to precisely define it. Here are the partners we need to work with, but these are all the different market segments that we could go to. Now there's a wonderful creative tension between that. Just sounds like la la land. Actually, when you go to an investor and said, yeah, but look at the size of the team you need 3,000 people for this. Where do you start? Right? Where you start with the so-called low-hanging fruit. We'll start in this particular aspect, this particular segment. We'll hire the people that know how to do a deal in this particular segment. We will go to that. I think it's necessary for you to be able to paint both pictures, because without both pictures being painted, I don't think you'll get the support for it. Because if you just focus on literally only the implementation of what you have, you look like a project. You don't look like a business. For you to look like a business, you need to be able to demonstrate that you have customers across multiple different spaces, but you know with very sharp clarity where you will start. There's a wonderful creative tension, therefore, between explaining your technology as more than a project which has marketplace, at the same time sounding like you know exactly where you want to start, what the benefits are going to be. So this picture of the orange and the dartboard follow directly from the question of what problem are we solving and for whom? And you can't answer it straight away. Nobody expects that to happen, to be honest with you. But you should be able to work towards that, because when you build the dartboard, you can then say, look, we will be a $5 million, $50 million, $500 million business, whatever it is, because we'll have penetrated all these market sectors. Our competitors look like this, this, and this, and these different aspects. These are the industry collaborators that we will need. But here's our starting place. We will go to the orange grove and pick the low-hanging fruit. That's where we start. We start by generating some cash, demonstrating we know how to do business, we know how to sell, we know how to make, we know how to license. We've done all our learning at that very early stages, early customers, your so-called proto customers. More about that in a few minutes. So this is all the preparation work that you need to be doing. So just going back to this, you need to be able to articulate very clearly what problem, whose problem, why is it better, faster, cheaper, etc. Please practice that kind of concept, right? That's why I was pressing, is it 5% better, 10% better, is it 50% better? What's the advantage you're giving over your rivals? Because unless people can quantify it somehow, they're very hard to persuade people that you've got something different there. It's not enough just to say I have some cool tech and I have some patents. Nobody cares. All they care about is how you'll benefit them. The next stage is understanding all the different markets that you could go into and eliminating the time-wasting markets. Also being able to say no. Right? So when I first heard about this, that EV electric vehicles are growing in India or set to grow in India, But actually, the deeper discussion that took place was on telecom towers, right? And batteries for telecom towers. Two different market sectors there. So on my chart, those would be 2 of the 7 boxes. There may well be other boxes there, maybe public transport, maybe auto rickshaws, maybe all sorts. And so you can look at that, and then you say, where is the best place? Who has the most pain? I guess remote base stations that are, having diesel generator sets and so on, maybe the managers and owners of that might feel the most pain. Therefore, my viable applications are the following. We'll start in Maharashtra, we'll start in Bombay or in Delhi or whatever it is, and my significant win will come from knowing that I've sold 50,000 of these things across that market. Or I'll have penetrated 4 out of the 7 applications will cause a significant win to come by. So you can use that kind of mental methodology to begin to define where you go. Okay, so a quick skim through the next piece. So the first part, Premnath and Anmol, together with the various mentors who are around and the incubator managers, is to maybe use that first part of the translational journey just to kind of drill deeper and deeper into the viability of the business. Okay. This next part is probably more relevant for those of you who have already started something or are about to start or expect to start and understand what it looks like. So going back to that 7 boxes and then narrowing down that middle circle, we've come up with this terminology that's my colleague and I, Uday Phadke and myself, and I think you're meeting Uday later in the program, about something we call market spaces. So this is based on the sort of idea of a value chain. Who's creating value, who's taking value, who's transferring value. So all the way along in a value chain, you have a set of activities that are being done, and each one is adding or taking out value. Mostly it's from raw material to finished product, there is a value being added in the entire chain, right? Whether it's linear or circular, that's what's going on. So within each of those components of the value chain, you have competition and potential collaborators. And understanding where exactly you fit into that activity chain and what drives that part of the chain, whether it's regulation or technology or market need, means that you will be much clearer about what it is you have on offer. So this idea of market spaces, you'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to make you draw a market space, but I would encourage you after my session to experiment with that. So here's one I gave in some years ago to the De Beers diamond thing. This is such a weird workshop that I gave in London. Sorry, it was a keynote speech. There were so-called site holders, and this is a group of Jains, Gujaratis, Jewish people, white tough guys from New York, London, all coming together in a big room, about 400 or 500 of them. And in readiness for that, I was thinking, okay, how do the diamonds go from the mine to the finger, right? So you had mining, part of the value chain, people like De Beers, Rosa, BHP, etc., Angola, the countries there, Congo, Zimbabwe, and so on. So all of these companies and countries are providing mining services. There were the DTCs, these diamond trading companies that were sorting out small stones, big stones, and so on. They went to the so-called site holders as rough diamonds, trading in bulk, breaking it by region, type of diamonds that then went off for polishing, mostly to India, plus Israel and New York. Dynamic, innovative, mostly all traveling through Belgium for some reason. And then they would go to wholesalers, and then eventually polished, manufactured diamonds, rings, necklaces, etc., end up in retail and going to the consumer. That's the chain. So understanding which bit of it you fit it into was quite important. If you're De Beers involved in the mining and big, huge machinery that you might have, you might not be the best person to do retail. Right? Equally, if you're a retailer, you can't really back engineer all the way to very dominant companies like De Beers and BHP to get involved in looking for rough diamonds. So each one has an expertise involved with it. Each one has a logistical impact, price point, all of this sort of. And by the way, when I say India, Israel, New York, deep cultural roots by deeply held family linkages, okay, dominated by the Jains and the Jews and and a few others from outside. If you're not part of that culture, I don't think you can get past that diamond trade in the middle. It'll be very challenging. Chinese were coming in, but they were coming in at the retail level. So this was inspired by Michael Porter and his whole value chain thing. Give you another example. This is from the dairy industry. And just by way of a European, this is not the Indian scene, this is the European scene. You have cows, and you may have a part of the value chain is you have to provide grass, fertilizers, good health for the cows, veterinary scientists and all that. Poor things are taken away to milking parlors in various places. And one is looking for yield, and they need to be clean, they need to be efficient. There's also technology to measure the amount of milk coming out. But each cow is giving some slightly different milk, different levels of fat, and one may or may not have this or that. And then it all goes into one great big tanker into the logistics. Goes for pasteurization, where this cow has got this amount of fat, that cow has got that amount of fat. All this is going heating, cooling, filters, valves, all to pasteurize it. You remove the fat, you put it back in. All sorts of things happen to it, and from there it goes to conversion into cheeses and yogurts and different types of milk, etc., etc. And some of it hits the retail sector, right? There's another example of a value chain. And you can imagine that the dairy herd, and then there's the people who do the milk, people who do the logistics, people who do the processing. Each one is different, and there's a link, there's a value being added to each component. If you happen to be a chemical engineer and you have one particular little valve going on, which is part of the pasteurization, you need to understand where you fit into this whole thing. You need to understand why people will buy from you. Equally, the quantum physics-based postdoc that I came across, who had a mechanism for diagnostic of tuberculosis in cattle, was very excited to do that. I spoke to a farmer friend of mine who has herd only of 300 cattle, particular cattle. I said, can I get this so-and-so to talk to you? He said, no, not to me, talk to my vet. So I don't care. I'm not going to go and check for TB in my cows, but my vet, I pay my vet monthly retainers to keep my cows healthy, right? So go talk to the vet. So instantly, this postdoc with a quantum physics-based sensor was thinking who to talk to, not to the farmer, but needs to talk to the vet, then probably downstream to the milking industry and the pasteurization to understand if there's some downstream implications for it. Right? So whose problem are you solving? What problem are you solving? I talked about HTL already, hydrothermal liquefaction. So this is this basically pressure cooker device, which is the second box on the top left. But look at the chain of events that happen before and after. First of all, you have to think about what potential feedstock you've got. That comes into the process and continuous flow under pressure, which produces some kind of biocrude or char of some kind, which then through various separation and distillation provides all sorts of other end outputs at the far end, right? And in between the processes, you have particulation, injection of water and other fluids, and various forms of heat resource. So the energy equation, of course, at that point has to be less than the overall value of the output. So where do we fit in? So where we fit in, waste industry is the front end, separation refineries and customers the other end, and somewhere in the line, a company called 350 Solar has got a particular technology to solve. But if we don't know the whole chain, it's difficult to legitimize where we fit. Who do we talk to? Do we talk to the waste guys, or do we talk to the biocrude guys? Who do we need to talk to in order to say, what price point do we have? What solution do we have? What energy equation should we have? Where and how do we get the feedstock? That's the reason for knowing where you fit in. This monstrous example is another one. It's about media and entertainment. Those of you that are dealing with tech to do with the internet and so on, the lovely example actually, this might be, for example, content creation, packaging and publishing. Those of us in ed tech or something similar would be interested in that. How do we commercialize it through advertising and promotion? How do we distribute the content through digital access provision? What sort of devices do we need to align with? And finally, what's the user experience of the customer? So if you look at that, the value chain then splits into a number of different steps along the way: content development, and then packaging it, and planning the media, and then you've got distribution infrastructure, network people. Who do we speak to? You know, where do you, if you're a content provider, at what point do you speak to Geo at Reliance or Vodafone or whoever it is you need to speak with, right? Do we need to speak to Samsung? Who do we need to speak to make sure that it works with their device? Often I find that iPhone versus Android, you know, debates here. Which point do we hit? Okay, this is the broad example. Now look at what happens with market drivers. There are new content players coming, so enormously competitive over there. New forms of intermediaries. There may be that the major companies can lock you out, particularly people like Apple can lock you out of something. And how do we monetize it? Maybe pay-per-view. What is the technology driver? Content management, advertising inventory, hybrid devices, multi-device operating systems, and so forth. And then regulatory drivers might be coming in. So if you take the big picture of having five components of your value chain that you might fit into, try to figure that out, and then ask yourself the question: what's driving that part of the market? What's driving that part of the technology? And what are the regulatory drivers we need to account for? So all of these linear pictures I've shown you are now increasingly turning into circular diagrams, right, for circular economy applications. You might even use a mind map. It doesn't matter how you do it, but I would really encourage you to get into that helicopter, look down at your marketplace as if you're doing a mapping exercise of the kind I showed you here. You know, fine-grained detail. The road goes here. Here are the contour lines of and here's a sand pit. Here's a pub. Here's a what I've taken an ordnance survey map. Here's a church. Here's a National Trust land. Where is everybody? Who are the competitors? Where are the collaborators? What's the role of the regulators? What's my landscape look like of this flow from left to right or around the economy of trying to make something happen? So I would really encourage you to work with your mentors to develop a full, thorough understanding of the industry that you're going to go into. It also will guide you on what team members you need. So why this? Well, I found this lovely picture of Bert Wolfhoffen, Dutch entrepreneur, 58 plus companies. He also very kindly sponsored the European Foundation for Entrepreneurship Research, and I got involved with him for several years. Being an entrepreneur, he was also thoroughly challenging in so many different ways. Wonderful gentleman. And in the 54 or so companies that he started, almost every single one of them, he had an MBA team to a thorough industry analysis using the work of one of the gurus that he was very fond of, it's Michael Porter's industry analysis. He wanted evidence of who did what within the industry sector before he invested a penny into any of them. So I would say, let's take that advice from a hugely wise and seasoned entrepreneur to figure out what and how we should proceed. I've given a link to his Wikipedia page. When I met him some time ago, I think he was in his mid to late 70s, maybe early 80s. And I met him numerous times across various European projects that we were working on together. And you know what? He put me to shame every time because he'd been up for a swim in the hotel or wherever it is at 6 o'clock in the morning. He had done his 25, 30 laps, and then he was ready for breakfast by 7:30, 8 o'clock. And the level of energy, mental and physical energy he was putting in is a total inspiration. So, and his methodology for making investment decisions also I thought was extremely smart. Anmol and Premnath, I'm wondering whether we should take a 5-minute break at this point to give people a chance to either grab a glass of water or something and come back before we do the next piece.
That's fine, but how much time do you need beyond this?
Well, I think that because we had a little bit more time on Q&A, I would say that we definitely need 30 minutes. Maybe we just ask if everyone would like to go, just literally grab a glass of water and come back.
Yeah. So we can have a 2-minute break. We'll do that. In the meantime, I will request that we can just plan how, I mean, maybe you can just think through how you want to cover the topics, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can take a little longer if required, but not too much longer. Yeah, thanks.
No, I think we might just drop the next breakout. That would be the answer, I think, and just have a Q&A at the end.
No, but I please do cover all the.
Yes, I'll cover the material.
Yeah.
But just maybe
Okay.
drop the breakout.
Yeah, everybody can just come back in 2 minutes. The clock starts now.
Yeah. We'll grab a glass of water.
Yeah, maybe by 6:30 we'll start again. Yeah.
Is there a method for voting on this?
Yeah, we can.
I wonder if there's just one question we could ask for a vote. Is this being useful, this session?
We'll have feedback at the end of the day, but I think we can, don't worry about that. I think you can just cover what you can today. Yeah.
Let's do that. I'm always happy to come back. So let's press on. So I'm assuming that everyone's managed to stretch their back or their legs or something just to unwind from being seated.
Can you give them a couple more minutes, because I have said that we'll start at 6:30, so just in case somebody has walked off.
Sorry, my clock is fast. Then what time is it now in India?
It's 6:28 p.m.
I've gone analog, Premna.
I'm just looking at my laptop here, so.
Yeah, very sophisticated. You could probably see that I keep that. Can you see my clock?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I keep that with whichever country zone I happen to be talking with next to me. Are we okay if we go about 5-10 minutes over?
Yeah, we can start now. Yeah. Let's cover the grounds, but yeah, little longer is okay.
Okay, fine. All right. Welcome back. Those of you that have gone away, those of you that are seated there, well done. So I would like to, yeah, this is just a little aside for all of you. Short side point, basically. In addition to all of us getting very excited about whose problem you solve, what problem you solve, how much money you need to raise, what's the IP, doing all the strategy and stuff, there's also a very personal journey for all of you. You know, those of you that are already starting, have started, you'll already be feeling that. You know, you're making the journey from science to enterprise, from scientist to entrepreneur. So you will be facing different set of questions right along the journey. So just bear that in mind, as will your team members when they join you. What's their motivation? How are they going to take it? What's the sense of risk, etc. And my sense is that you'll all have your own sense of affordable loss of how much you can put in, how much you can do. So those are the kind of issues you want to take into account as you traverse. We don't cover that necessarily in some of these workshops, but you need to think about it. Meanwhile, your scale-up journey. So now you've done the translational one. Hopefully, you've kind of nailed down the whole business of where you are. You remember the low-hanging fruit and the kind of the dartboard thing, that wonderful creative tension that exists between them. But a little bit of that takes place here as well in terms of the scale up. Just 1 second, there's some work going on outside my window. I'll just close it. So the scale up manual with Uday and myself, we've built this on the basis of a huge amount of data and insight and experience over many, many years. And the fundamentals are the following. Okay, the fundamental concept behind it, I think, is the following, which is that there are two components, and the two axes are important. One is simply to do with the rate of growth of your customer base. So there are many ways you can measure things like sales revenue, amount of money raised, the number of people you employ, all of those sorts of things. But for us, one of the most interesting metrics that we thought would be useful would be total number of customers that you can have. So we call that C max. And why is that? Because I think when you have a total number of customers, it's a judgment. What's the total number of customers? You can also plot like how long will it take you to get there? And then in order to compare data across many different types of industry sectors, we normalized both to 1. So as you'll see in this case, your C max and your T max reach 1. It's a flat line. This is coming out of the whole kind of innovation literature, basically. And I think this is a really useful way of thinking about it. Those of you that have started the process, if you haven't started, think about it. How will you keep track of people you believe are your customers? The whose problem am I solving becomes a number in some Excel spreadsheet. Right? Really critical, because one is you're acquiring customers, B, you have to retain them in order to get the growth that you expect to grow. So what's behind this picture is, I think, ultimately is to generate the maximum of your C max that you can with the lowest T max that you can. For certain industry sectors, they just take 10, 12 years. Other industry sectors might take 7 or 8 years. Some might take 15 to 20 years. It really depends how long you think it will take to get to T max before the thing becomes established as a full-fledged business doing things with the number of customers where you believe you have T max. You'll also spot, some of you, that when we're at chasm 3, and I'll characterize each of these chasms for you, which is about halfway along your journey when it's normalized, right? You still only got 10% of your customer base. It's only then that the so-called hockey stick takes off in front of you. So it's really important to understand those 3 characteristic chasms and how they take off. So here's an example of one company. I quite like this illustration that shows the 3 chasms. What is a chasm? A chasm is when you stop adding to your cumulative customer base. Simple as that. So you've got 0 customers, 1, 2, 3, 4 customers, then you stop adding to it, which means you have 0 addition to customer base. Therefore, you have this chasm or ravine or valley, call it what you will. We call it a chasm because it's a rather sharp drop. So you see that characteristically from our data, we have identified that generally speaking, there are 3 such inflection points, or chasms, if you will. And what happens with that is really important to understand. How to cross those chasms is critically important to understand. But please, in your own mind's eye, when you're putting together some kind of argumentation for why you should be supported, you say, here's my market. It's no longer 40 billion anymore, or 300 million, or any other sales metric that you might have, but actually say there are potentially 1,000 customers that we could reach out to. Now, a company called Corrosion Radar, which I'm absolutely delighted to be on the board of them as a non-exec director, was a student, a PhD postdoc who came by IIT Madras, then Cranfield, and then he came to one of my startup weekends, and he said that corrosion under insulation is a massive problem, and that he had a sensor technology. We could look at the outside of pipes that had corrosion, and he could detect it. And then he explained something really nice in that same pitch. He said, there are 750 locations at which this is a major problem. He'd done his homework, right? 700, I thought, ooh, 750, that means 750 customers. He can reach those 750 because he knows where they are, who they are, why they are. He can't reach it all overnight, but he knows who they are. So his C max became 750. What I got excited about was each customer had thousands of kilometers of pipeline across their various refineries, right? Which meant that this company could be enormous. So C max is 750, huge volume of sensor technologies and data and this and that. T max is where he and I separated. He thought he could do it in about 3 to 5 years, 3 to 7 years, something like that. So all the venture capitalists were going on about. I said it'll take you 12 to 15 years to reach T max because they're across geographies, across different types of buying habits, etc. And if you have reached chasm 2, possibly in about 6, 7 years, you'll have done well. Right? So what's been happening there? So that's kind of way of thinking about it. Now, when we see the production of the vaccine, by the way, for coronavirus, we've seen that what should normally take 10 to 12 years has been compressed down to less than 2 years, right? Broadly speaking. How did we get rid of 10 years in T-Max for just that one product? Lots of things happen. Huge amount of willpower from policymakers coming in to smash that T-Max down to nothing. And the objective now is to reach C-Max, i.e. all the people to be given a vaccine in a shorter time scale as possible. So
can I interrupt a little bit, Shai?
Yeah, sure.
Can you just go back 2 slides? It's just wanted to, I'm not sure people might have, previous slide.
Yeah.
People might have understood what exactly you were plotting, because they don't know that this was, say, few thousands of companies, all science-based and deep tech startups, right?
Yes.
You probably, if you can please talk through that also, because this data based actually this is from your own data for many thousands of companies based on which.
Yes.
Yeah, and also the transition from one chasm to another in simple language, what does it mean? It'll help, because I don't think it would ring a bell right now.
Yeah, no, that is 4 slides away.
Okay, you're going to cover it. Okay, please do. Thank you.
And methodology, I guess, is important, but I was bypassing that. So indeed, as Premnath says, we took lots of data. The first cut of data was from some 3,000 companies, and we plotted that across a general understanding the innovation curve itself. And then it's when we found some inflection points, some flat points. Then we drilled deeper into some 309 companies with some interviews, meetings, focus groups, dinner conversations, etc., to try and validate everything. And people who are willing to share their data, because it's sensitive commercial data to share. So across about 12 different industry sectors and several countries. So the data is international across many of the deep tech sectors, both in physical and life sciences. And all of that combined to show us that there's a common phenomenon of these 3 inflection points. Actually, even in the innovation literature, those of you that are familiar with Everett Rogers' innovation adoption curve, he talks about the innovator customers, the early adopters, and the late majority, etc. So at each point, there's a curve inflection point. If I go back to the Everett Rogers' one, the original theoretical proposition is there's a diffusion of technology. And he's a marketing guy. And basically the diffusion for him is, how does the communication spread for those very early customers to later and later customers in order for the customers then to adopt the new technology? Right? So that was where he was coming from. A fellow called Jeffrey Moore then built on top of that with his book on how to sell all this stuff, and we called it Crossing the Chasm. So the characteristic of the early stage of technology, where it is being tested and prototyped and being proved and so on, means that the customers that you need to approach would be the proto customers, people who are willing to try it out, which Everett Rogers refers to as early adopters. But then when you're hitting the mainstream customers, you need to have a fully formed product. That's basically the overall story. So we looked at the data, and our data told us, yeah, indeed, there are inflection points, the different characteristics to each inflection point. The first one is simply, does this thing work? Does the product work? And having a customer, single customer, or even a handful of customers that are willing to try you out, they may not pay you, but they're still representing the characteristics of a customer, what they need. So you're now working with your proto customer, and that then takes you along, and you refine the product and you refine the services and you put all the thing together, and your form factor will improve, your service proposition improves, your marketing language improves, you bring the right people in. And the second chasm is you're going from being a project to becoming a fully fledged business. Now you're looking at becoming a sustainable long-term venture. Right? And the third chasm is you cross this point and you say, okay, now we know how to do this thing. We've now proved ourselves by bringing a business. Now it's time to scale, and now the importance of it takes on a different complexion. And I will now repeat this in slightly different ways. So we've come up, we borrowed from the technology readiness levels of NASA and said, how do we frame deep tech stuff coming to market, and and how far it has traveled? Most of the people we meet, if I'm honest with you, is just they have a research going on in the lab, and somebody decides, well, I no longer want to just publish papers. I would like to take it out into the market. So we need to validate the research, right? Does the thing work even in the lab? Can we publish papers, file patents, etc.? And now we need to define it as something that the customer wants to use. Whose problem, what problem, what are we trying to do here? On the basis of that understanding, we can start to build prototypes, maybe nearly get to that point. It might be a simulation on a computer, I don't know. It could be something along those lines. A working prototype is you've got to your customer now, your first chasm. Somebody said, yeah, come and do this with me. Let's have a go. Let's try it out. Talk to my R&D guys, or talk to so-and-so. Let's put some money together. Let's put some time aside. And let's put something that shows that it works, not in your lab, but on my premises, right? In my industrial use, that it works in that situation, in that context. And a few months later, okay, it's proven. Now we know the thing works. Brilliant. We've got feedback. We've improved it. We've played with it. We've got the screwdrivers out, etc. Now we're now starting to talk about early customers and a fully functioning product, which then gets endlessly refined, version 2, 3, 4, etc. Service packages get put together and then gets deployed into the mass market. So there are, if you like, 8 or 9 inflection points even in this, but the fundamentals are that somewhere between 4 and 5 you have chasm 1, and somewhere between 7 and 8 you have chasm 2, and then you have full expansion between 9 and 10 coming through. So what does all that look like? Now, I'll come back to that in a moment with another chart of the chasms. So what should you do to cross these chasms? What is the actual activity? What is it? I talked about holistic management earlier. So there are these things, management tools, if you like, we call them vectors. So to try and signify some sort of a dynamic changes that take place. And there are 3 big bars you'll have spotted by this time. And now I'd like to just pay homage to Edith Penrose from the 1950s in her famous book on the theory of the growth of the firm, when she gave us a really simple sentence about the role of the manager. Very elegant. The role of the manager is to deploy scarce resources to the best opportunities in the marketplace. That's basically the role of the manager. I know that subsequently the Chicago school came in and told us that the role of the manager was to maximize profit for the shareholder. Right? And that kind of changed the dynamics a little bit. But in our case, if we still go back to Edith Penrose, what you see is the internal vectors are those scarce resources that you have available to you. You have some technology which you can deploy. You have IP, you have knowledge. You can synthesize the product and the services in a way that separates you from the competition. You have ways of making things and deploying things which are, again, different from anybody else. You have options. And then you have your own talent, your own leadership, and the culture with which you're doing something. and how those come together, who is in your team, etc., and how much money you have available to take the risks that you want to take are all kind of your internal vectors, your resources. Go to the other side of the screen, and you have your external vectors, which is another way of summarizing your overall market opportunities. First and foremost is the market spaces, which I talked about, Bert Wolfhofen's thing. You know, who's the industry, who's in the industry, what do you understand about it? Get in the helicopter, have a look at the big picture, and identify at the same time where it is you're going to land and whose problem you'll solve. And therefore, you can frame the proposition in the context of competition and regulation. You really define the needs of the customers very, very precisely. So for example, if we take that vacuum cleaner story right at the beginning, you know, what problem, whose problem? We want to decrease the bacterial load in hospital. Yeah, but whose problem are you solving? It might be that you're solving the problem for the hospital management, actually, because they're having to deal with a lot of stuff going on with people falling ill and paying penalty fines or having to make insurance claims. You may not be solving the problem for the patient or the doctor because, you know, you do, but the real problem being so. Therefore, how do you pitch that proposition to the hospital manager? Because that's the person who has to buy your equipment. Customers, being the patients in this case, are using it, as indeed are the doctors and their families, patients' families. But the person who needs to buy it, wait a minute, there's regulation coming in that will penalize you. Therefore, we need to frame the proposition alongside that. And then obviously your distribution, marketing, and sales will fit into that. Great. Now you've understood your marketplace, your external vectors. That's the starting point. I would say 0-1 market spaces is where you should start. Then you go down to your internal vectors and say, okay, how do I align with it? Now come the trade-off, the composite vectors of the trade-off, which is what's my strategy to get there? What's my business model going to be, right? So how am I going to be low price, high price? Am I going to be a niche marketer? What's my approach in the value chain? How relevant am I? What my execution scores if I set up a set of metrics? And then as far as the business model is concerned, am I going to be licensing? Am I going to be, what's my revenue structure going to look like? And what's the overall, you know, methodology for me to create value, collaborate? Am I doing open source or open innovation approaches? How am I going to go to market with this? So those are your basically 12 vectors which you need to figure out of how you deploy them. And I would say that early understanding of this would be good. Where's it gone? And why do you need to understand this, all this stuff, right? So I've kind of given you a new language, a new way of defining the journey where you can measure progress. You got your maturity indicators. You got your 9 or 10 of them, if you like. Using the NASA, you could use the NASA. There may well be other forms of TRLs that you could use. But just figure out precisely where you are on the journey, because the more realistic you are, the better it is. Understand T max for each space. How long will it actually take you to get there? Understand C max by trying to drill into the market spaces and getting involved, maybe getting some interns to figure this out for you, because then you actually get a strategy that you can have. You can employ people. One quick example of that was a software company, which for some weird reason, that software could do 2 different types of unrelated jobs. One was to go into the General Motors factory where it could bend the door. For some reason, it could do a control for the doors to be pressed steel device. And the same thing with almost no adaptation could also control industrial laundries. And so his customers for the door thing was basically like 1 or 2 companies in the UK, Ford and General Motors at the time. But for his industrial laundry, he commissioned somebody to go to the public library, sit down and dig through the so-called yellow pages back in the day. And he found there were some 1,700 such industrial laundries across the UK, page by page. He hired somebody, they rang up all 1,400 of them. They identified, I think it was 700 and something that were using the kind of system where they could make a difference. Of that, 17 of them, even during the phone call, expressed interest in the software, and they started to get some purchase orders. But here's the thing, then they could hire a salesman who went knocking on those 700 doors. didn't waste their time on all sorts of other peripheral activity because they knew exactly who they need to go speak to and what their product offer was. That's why I think that getting an understanding of Tmax, Cmax, and getting the fine grade is really important. The other thing is with this 12 vectors is you get a holistic approach. So you're not just obsessing over IP or obsessing over money or obsessing over sales or this or that. You kind of need to take the overall. If you do something over here, it has an impact over there, right? And finally, you get to calibrate your journey and then end up with a clear focus. I'm going to skip this, Premnath, because we don't have time for this, but maybe people can do this anyway. I would like to just skip on to this part, final part of the presentation, and open up for Q&A. So here we are. So chasm 1 is characterized by the fact that nobody believes you. Okay? Nobody believes your technology will solve their problem. Why? Because first of all, you're obsessing over your technology rather than the problem you're solving. And secondly, you have no evidence that it works other than maybe in your laboratory. So you need the help and support of what we call proto-customers, prototype customers. Customers will buy your prototype. They may or may not pay you money, right? But if they don't pay you money, you need to have a commercial deal with them, make sure that you have the IP locked up, but also if the whole thing is successful, that you can use it for your marketing and public relations or PR. So that's the role of the proto-customer. Probably some friend, some alumni from some, one of your old colleges or something that's now working in industry is the most likely. That's why I was asking somebody in the group earlier whether they were dealing with the automotive industry. And that's where the proto-customer will come from. Obsess over trying to find that as early as you can. Gives so much credibility. Incidentally, it also puts up the valuation. Second type of customer is your charter customer. Having had your proto customers to prove it, you now need to start approaching maybe half a dozen or a dozen, those of you that are in B2B, by the way, customers that look a lot more like your mainstream. You've now proved the product. You now need to prove that it works in their context and that you can service many such people in the process, right? Not just one proto customer, but you can service 10, 15 companies or 100, 200 companies, and you're building up the system. So now I'll come on to back to the vectors in a moment and give you an understanding of that. And the final group we're going to call the mainstream customers, strangely enough. And these guys don't want any hassle with your product and your service. They just want a form factor that works. In fact, I've got something I can show you. Those of you that are in the microprocessor thing, you may remember something called Raspberry Pi when it came out some 4 or 5 years ago. Basically came as a board with loaded chips, and all the computer guys got so excited by that whole thing. I took it home and they played with it, right? Not for me. I got one as well. I instantly gave it away to somebody who could do more with it. Now look at the form factor that it comes in a beautiful box, 2G RAM, chapa on it. You open the thing. I can see that Vaibhav is already excited because he's leaning forward. I'm not going to send this to you, Vaibhav. I still have to play with it. And the form factor now is, for those of you that haven't seen it, that's the computer, right? How cool is that? I can even understand it. It comes in a box with a mouse, with some plug device, a full book and everything. I still haven't figured out why I should waste my time using this. I will at some point, but it was a gift given to me at the Christmas event. But you can see the form factors changed to appeal to somebody like me. Not before. It was too crude. I am, for them, a late arrival mainstream customer. I'm not a proto customer or charter customer, right? So that's kind of the difference. You need to figure that out. So what? So what? So what's the following? How do these vectors impact on the different parts of your journey? So in the first instance, I would say probably, well, of course you have to do everything all at once because you're Superman or Wonder Woman, right? And you not only have to do this, you have to attend AIM Prime, you have to talk to mentors, you have to talk to all sorts of people at the same time. But the point is that within the context of trying to reach and cross chasm 1, there are probably three things more than any of the other things on which you have to focus your time. Focusing on IP is, of course, important for many of you. Understanding the thing works, just in plain English, the technology development and deployment. Does this thing work in my hands? And what's the benefit for me of playing around with this device with you? So frame the proposition. Why will I benefit? So features, advantages, and benefits. Very crude in any marketing textbook, those three letters come together. What does it do? What's the advantage over anything else? And how will I benefit from it? And that is one of the three components that you need to take into account: IP management and technology development and deployment. That will help you to cross your chasm one. Really focused. Of course, you have to do everything else as well, but in an 8-hour day, those are the three things that will get the most amount of time. Look what happens at chasm two. I says, oh my God, why did I go into business, right? Now you need a team, ladies and gentlemen, because without a team, it's not possible to cross chasm two. Because you need to be showing good understanding of your market space and where you fit in. Otherwise, VCs, investors, whoever will not believe you. You need to have a clear proposition that you are framing, that people understand. You need to really, who's your customer, who's your customer, who's your customer is a repeat question. How will you reach them? Your route to market, your marketing and sales comes in. What's your business model going to be? What's your strategy to reach and grow and scale? And then all your resources need to be in place as well. Everything hits the fan at the same time. And this is where I run into massive disputes with our friends from California who talk about fast fail and doing pivots and so on. Because if we've not done enough work and thinking, then we will, of course, keep pivoting to the point that we're on a merry-go-round, right? And the pivoting thing, I understand that. It's not that, because as we discover, as we learn things along the journey, we will need to shift. But please, let's not take the approach of just throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks. That piece of mud didn't stick, so let's try throwing some more mud at the wall. Right? That's too expensive a way of learning. So I think doing the translational journey piece to validate where you are, and understanding these vectors, and understanding your TRLs is going to be important to you. For some of you, crossing chasm 3 will be the most exciting part of all, because you know what? It'll be the reward for all your endeavors and your efforts. You'll have built a beautiful business that is making a difference on this planet in some way. You're scaling it up. You've got talent coming through, but the focus now is on distribution, marketing, and sales. The role of the scientist, the technologist is receding into the background. And now you've got the sales guys coming in with their Mercedes cars and BMWs or whatever else that they come with to make the sales. So that's kind of where you are. And I would say my concluding points are: get a grip on the market spaces, get a grip on, start from the beginning, get a grip on the real value of your technology for the use, whose problem and what problem you're solving. Then understand the market space where you're going to be operating. And then from that, we'll cascade the other things. As part of your market analysis, try to understand your C max and your T max, because that's really important to understand so many things, including your own motivation, to be honest. How long will you go at trying to make this happen? So I think, Premnath, I should probably stop at that and take a load of questions.
Sure.
I'm sorry for the noise in the background. If you're getting that, there's nothing I can do.
No, I think we didn't really get disturbed by any noise. That's fine. But can you please keep it on the slide where you had all the vectors at different chasms?
Yeah,
because I thought you can, we can talk through that as well, right?
Sure.
So I've been also putting some links from your triplecasm.com site.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
So that they can pick it up from there. Yeah. Let's take up a few questions. First of all, I just thought, a couple of points here.
Is the screen okay?
Yeah. I think slide 30. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I would think that most of the companies, startups are pre-chasm 2 here.
Oh, yeah.
Right? All our guys, most of them are here. A couple of them have products which they have tried it out with proto customers and are probably moving to charter customers. Okay, I don't know how many, but perhaps I can think of perhaps John's. You might be one of them, right? Uh, who, but of course, everybody is aspiring to get to beyond Chasm 3 eventually, so they are going to face that barrier at some point, which they can see in the form of. Sometimes you see those chasms show up even when you're fundraising and so on, right?
Indeed.
And people, most of us are techies out here who are probably just focusing on IP management, technology development, and deployment. And
Yeah.
right now, for example, when you pose the question of whose problem, what problem, it's all about proposition, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's where roughly we are. And the team reflects that also, I think. But as we go ahead, it's going to be, as you showed, a lot wider, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of
Absolutely.
the kind of skills, the kinds of activities, and so on. So the role of the founder also will change considerably, isn't it? Do you want to
Yes.
comment on that? The original team versus the team that operates after Chasm 2. And the reason it's also probably important is because when you're raising money, you need to be aware that you'll have to do all of this, and therefore your investors need to understand that you're willing to accept all
Yeah.
that, right? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And I think, um, remember, this is a huge topic
Yeah.
about the founder's transition from being a scientist to becoming the entrepreneur. Step one is, do they want to do it? Right? Do they want to even be that? Because if that's not where their heart is, I would say that the transition is from being the scientist in the university or the research lab into maybe becoming the CSO, chief scientific officer, or if they're practical people, then maybe becoming the CTO, chief technical officer, who makes things happen. So the way that the team is formed at the most senior levels nowadays is branded as the so-called the CXO, right? Which is you got the chief executive officer, chief financial officer, chief technical or scientist. That some combination like that needs to grow, so that the role is then much clearer for each one. So the poor old CEO does all the heavy lifting of the paperwork and sings the praises of the company and meets big customers, etc. They might have a very senior level marketing person who can guide the strategy development on a customer by customer basis and go off and acquire, put in the systems and processes and hire people and so forth. And the original founding scientist has got at this point probably a couple of options, right? One option would be to keep the shares that they have in the company, to keep that financial interest going, but to step away from the operational side of the company and join the advisory board or something like that, where they can provide a guiding hand. That's typically where professors famous go, right? It's like going to the House of Lords or Rajya Sabha or something like that, right? You get kicked upstairs. But the scientists that want to make the transition themselves will begin to have to uh, make personal journeys from away from science towards the business. But the senior team at the board level, at the senior management level, needs to be this mix of people who are marketing, finance oriented, and some science and tech oriented. 3, 4 of those core components will
Mhm.
necessary.
Okay. So let me just move to the next question. Tulsi had this question of can you please share your thoughts on the role of incubation managers in the scale up journey of startups?
This is a great question. I'm sorry I'm laughing because this is like how much time have we got? But I think that,
Okay, I'll help you with that in 2 minutes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think step one, I think, is to probably use a decent kind of a diagnostic arrangement of some kind that says, look at the maturity level of this company, the technology, where are they involved in, and learn to ask the tough questions about the kinds of things that we've been discussing this evening, and of course our other questions as well. And I'm a big follower of philosophy of action learning. So for the incubation manager, I would say um, ask a lot of questions that are relevant at the stage of business the company is at or the technology is at, and see if the entrepreneur, aspiring entrepreneur, comes back with decent enough answers. Because if they're not acting on those questions, then kind of wasting your time as well. Okay, that's so yeah. I don't know if that goes all the way, but in my own role is if people don't do things, we're not going to go anywhere.
Sure, sure. There are questions on how do you understand or estimate what is Tmax and what is Cmax for your own. How do you decide that for your own, problem you're addressing or the.
Okay, so there's a light-hearted answer to that and the practical answer. The light-hearted answer, Prema, is buy the book, right? Or borrow the book from your library.
Yep.
And have a look. We've put Tmax in for a number of different industry market spaces in that. I think that probably in the B2B, for most of you, it will be between 8 to 12 years, I suspect, Tmax, to reach the total number of customers. If only because the sheer difficulty of opening doors in customers, reaching out to all the people you need to reach out to. So broadly speaking, and you can do some analysis by looking at companies that you want to look like. So a sort of copycat thing, and just see how long they've been going, how much money they raised, how many not customers you won't find, but what size of company they've become by looking at their websites and trying to figure this out. So for example, with the HTL, we found, for example, that Lysella, who is probably the dominant player in plastics remediation using HTL, I think the originated idea around 2003 is now 2021. So now they're getting into the marketplace. They've had a very tough journey, not because they couldn't do it, but just nobody believes you for 2-3 years, until you have that breakthrough.
Yep. So another interesting insight over there was that half the way through, you had only reached about 10% of Cmax.
Yeah.
And if Tmax, which is the time, maximum time is, say, imagine a pharma product where it's 20 years, you're talking about 10 years into it where you're roughly there. So this is a big distinction between, the usual ITS, IT kind of companies and deep science, deep tech kind of startups. And it takes time to build all of that out. And of course, investors and entrepreneurs need to understand that, and incubators, of course, as well, right?
Absolutely, because there is a false narrative, I think, from the VC community, because they have their own exit plans, right?
Yeah.
And as a result of that, they create unrealistic timelines. And when they do that, then they are holding the entrepreneur's feet to the fire.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, incidentally, Premna, it looks like I'm in a call in about 5 minutes' time.
Yeah, so I think we'll close very soon. There are quite a few questions which I'll request Anmol to cover, to please collect and pick that up separately as well. Okay.
More than happy. More than happy to do that.
Yeah, and I think there are some. Sure.
That all coming. Oh my God, 35 in the chat line.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we will leave it here. There are quite a few, but these books are available in the Venture Center library, and some of you might want to also see the website which I sent out, the Triple Chasm. The triplechasm.com, and that one has quite a lot of useful reading, videos, resources which will illustrate it to you. I've always found that this is a very good way of trying to understand the sequence in which some of these companies progress and what is important at different stages, and sort of a little more aligned to some of us as scientists and engineers and our way of thinking. So some of you might find that more useful, and you'll also notice I had cut pasted a small segment from the website which talked about MVPs and how that terminology, may or may not be useful. So you might find Shai, a lot of them have heard the California version of it as well. So in other sessions, so I thought perhaps this is a different perspective that they should carry as well. So with that we'll close. But can I request Mugdha and Anmol to make the announcements? Sorry, Shai, you wanted to say something?
No, just that I think what the California crowd came up with a really, really useful set of ideas to put a sense of urgency and agility in the minds of the entrepreneurs. So I think that's all very good. But we're dealing with very different kind of startups, and we have to take a little bit of that with a pinch of salt. So that's all I think I would like to say. But again, thank you very much for inviting me in today, Premnath, and I'll leave the meeting while you finish wrap up over there. And thank you all very much for your participation. And hopefully I'll see you some, if not all of you again, somewhere soon.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. I think Mugdha has put up a form, online feedback form. Please fill it up. That's also your sort of mark as attendance. We are also, I think, Mugdha, please go ahead. You can announce other things.
So I hope all of you have joined the Google Classrooms to get access to the material. Also ensure you have joined the WhatsApp group using the invite. Also, I'm assuming you have got in touch with your teammates. If not, please have a quick call, and your teams are there on the participants page. We are now going to organize project team meetings with Dr. Premnath starting 25th of June. Anmol will shortly send you an invite to book your slots. So the slots are going to be 45 minutes duration, and this is a heads up slide for your the slots which will be available in the on the following days and timings. So look out for Anmol's email where the slots will be announced. So please book your slot. Before booking your slot, ensure that you book it in a team-wise fashion. In the sense, for example, Team Bryota, only one member should book the slot, and consult your incubator partner before booking the slots, because we want all the members in Team Bryota, including the incubation partner, to be present in that slot. So each one of you, please note, all your team members, including the incubation partner, should be present in the slot. So these are the upcoming slots. And of course, upload your assignment, those who have not done so, the earlier Dr. Hiran's assignment on the Google Classroom, and the feedback link.